So, what are the chances that in the NFL draft coming up in about 2 weeks, the Saints are going to be looking towards the offensive side of the ball at number 14? I'm thinking pretty good. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. I think before you dive too deep into what the Saints are doing in the first round, you have to kind of look at the way the depth charts and the rosters are currently sitting. And you're definitely going to want to start with the offense because I think that's where the biggest no, I don't think. I know, and I think every Saints fan knows that's where the biggest issues are going to be as far as your roster. This is one I just kind of drew up based on their current roster. This is Friday afternoon. In fact, they signed two players this morning on the offensive side of the ball. We'll talk about in a minute. And what I did basically is I just highlighted players that they're not going anywhere in 2024. I don't believe and more than likely are going to be sticking around for 2025, or at least the Saints looking to keep him on the roster for 2025. Now, I'm basing this on the next two seasons because I truly believe with the Derek Carr restructure, we're basically tied to him for till the 20 through the 2025 season. And I think as long as Loomis, Dennis Allen, and Derek Carr, that triumvirate is connected, they're going to come and go as a group. And I think Carr's contract kind of gives everybody 2 years for this rebuild, reset. Mickey Loomis mentioned it at the owners' meeting. It's been a lot of talk. So, that being said, they're not drafting a quarterback. They're not going to, at 14, just not going to happen. Think the general manager, the head coach, and the starting quarterback are here for the next 2 years. I think the only thing that changes that is if it's 2024, none of this works out and it's a horrible catastrophe where they only win 3 or 4 games. 8, 9 wins, 10 wins are better. They're definitely safe. 10 wins are better. That likely puts them in the playoffs. 8 and 9, just missing like we did the last 2 years. If it's the right kind of miss, because last 2 years it was the wrong kind of miss. We played so below expectations. It it was horrible. It's going to be a tougher road to hoe this in 2024, trying to win 8 and 9 games because the schedule's getting tougher. Division opponents are getting tougher. Atlanta and Tampa Bay definitely. So this is kind of the reverse of that. If we stood right, had to take bets right now, I don't know if I could bet on this team winning 8 or 9 games right now. So I think that's where we're kind of sitting in all this. It's really 2 years. Football decisions, money decisions, married together, rebuild, reset the roster, draft wisely. So let's get in, which again, I think it eliminates any possibility of a quarterback coming in this year, um, at least in the first 2 rounds. Yeah, 3 backup quarterbacks on the roster behind Carr. Uh, Hayner, I think if he doesn't show anything, he's gone. I think that's why Mon was brought in. Mon, like Peterman, has experience with some of the new offensive coaching staff, familiar with them. And this sounds like a case of we don't want to have to teach every quarterback in the room what's going on. There's a couple veterans sitting back there to back up Carr that could likely step in and pick up pretty quick what's going on in the offense. And I think this is a move partly to protect Derek Carr, but partly to where he's not threatened by somebody coming in and taking his job because none of those guys behind him are taking his job. And I think also the offense is going to be less teaching involved with one of the two veterans that are behind him. More teaching the Carr, make sure he gets the system and can run it. Wide receiver is not a spot. I know there's a lot of talk about drafting a wide receiver at 14. I'm not opposed to it, especially if the new offensive coaching staff comes in and starts pounding the table for a certain guy to fit what they're trying to do. With Olave, Shaheed, and Perry, you have 3 really good young receivers who all have kind of strengths in different areas in the passing game. So I don't know if it's going to be to add that fourth receiver necessarily at 14, especially this is an insanely deep wide receiver draft coming up. There will be, much like Perry, who was drafted in the 6th round last year, there's going to be some good, very good NFL wide receivers being drafted on Sunday. So I think if it's the right guy at 14 for them, maybe. The three veterans behind him, Cedric Wilson, I think is on the roster. He's the stabilizing guy playing the slot, and he can be a possession guy. It's with some playability in him. Stanley Morgan is mostly special teamer, but I think they're going to let him compete for a chance to get more touches. St. Brown was signed this morning, like I mentioned earlier, with Kellen Mond. Big guy, like 6'4", 6'5", kind of known as one of those blocking receivers. Saints love blocking receivers. This zone scheme we're bringing in likely to be a little more run based than pass based. It makes sense on many levels, but I really think he's a long shot to make the team. But you never know. The key. Oh, let me do running backs real quick. Kamara and Kendry Miller should both do well in this scheme. We know a lot more about Kamara than we do Miller, but Miller, just hearing people talk, especially that followed him at TCU when he was in college, he should fit into this scheme very well. He's a runner, can catch the ball some, just like Alvin. Different style runners, both of them. But I think the big thing is, when we talked about last week, is in a zone scheme, the running back is so important with his vision and his cuts as opposed to the gap scheme. And the other two on the Williams and Robinson, both veteran running backs. Williams was here last year. We all know about him. At this point, I don't know if you get any production out of him. You just kind of stuck with him because of the contract, and you're not going to be stuck with him after 2024 unless. Well, no, I don't think you. I don't think he's going to be around after 2024. Robinson, veteran guy, knocked around with a few teams. He's a body. Saints are probably going to add somebody in the draft with one of those late round picks or UDA to come in and challenge, and they'll be looking for those zone style runners to fill in space there. Key to everything in the skill position is, what are they going to do with Taysom Hill? How are they going to use him? How is he going to get his snaps, and how is he going to get his touches? And I have no earthly clue to the answer to that question. So I've got him kind of listed off by himself. Typically, his quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, running back, and I am 100% sure Clint Kubiak is smart enough to know that Taysom Hill must get his touches every game. So if that works out, he's got a quirky contract. He's getting paid a lot of money for the not so much production he got the last 2 years under the Pete Carmichael scheme that didn't want to let Taysom touch it. It seemed like some games. But I think if scheme works out right, they're able to use him. He gets his production up, I think, closer to what that contract is. It gives him a chance to stick around and finish out his career in New Orleans. I think both sides definitely want that. I'm pretty sure the fans want that. He maybe has to take a pay cut or some type of restructure in the near future, this season or next season. We'll see. But I'm leaning towards, for the most part, I think both sides are going to try to work out him being here 2 more years. And at his age, that's probably the declining player may start coming into conversation around 2026. But the mess is offensive line. You have a very good center in Eric McCoy, a former first-round pick in Cesar Ruiz, who has not lived up to expectations, although he was better last year than he has been in the previous years. But barring, again, something spectacular happened where a house cleaning comes in after the 2024 season, I'm pretty sure neither one of these two guys are going anywhere over the next 2 seasons. Ruiz hopefully will benefit from the scheme change to the zone. Maybe that'll fit him a little more. You'll get a little more out of him. The other one is Ryan Ramczyk, who, if not for the unfortunate situation in his knees, he's up here, no red on him. That's why I kind of put him in red and moved him to the bottom. It's possible he missed 2024. Maybe he's back in 2025. He maybe comes back in 2024. I don't sounds like either one of those situations are real positive, but we don't know. We still have time. But ultimately, I think that everybody's assuming we may not see Ryan Ramczyk play football again. I, I'm hoping he proves us wrong. I think everybody is. But until then, you just kind of have to put him to the side, and everybody's hoping everything's going to work out there. Leaves you with Landon Young is most likely the right tackle. Played a few games. He's been around for a while. Played a few games last year after Ramczyk had to start missing time, or basically missed the last 4 or 5 games of the season. Filled in well at first. He ended up getting injured, and we had to pull in a veteran in Cam Irving, who, as far as I can tell, has not been brought back to the team for this year. So Young's kind of there by default. James Hurst is interesting. He's played both left tackle and left guard in his Saints career. Played both last year. Started at left guard, kicked out to left tackle when Trevor Penning was benched. You kind of looking, well, he could work in two spots. Olumuyiwa is the lineman they signed from Minnesota, was a starter in 2021 when Clint Kubiak, offensive coordinator, was there. After the 2021 season, Minnesota fired everybody. That's how Kubiak wound up in Frisco. But I think he was brought in to challenge for a starting job, or to at least fix a hole if it shows up, because it kind of sounds like, I believe he played mostly right tackle that 2021 year under Kubiak as the offensive coordinator. In the subsequent years, new staff came in. I think he had some injury issues, filled in. I kind of like James Hurst. I think he filled in a couple different spots when he did get snaps along the offensive line. So you don't really know what you got in him. You're getting an aging veteran in James Hurst. You're hoping you can get one more year out of. Pretty much an unknown quantity here, and a quantity that hasn't lived up to expectations at right guard. And then you have, I'm not even really sure who this Tommy Kramer is, but the only other two that really enter the conversation is Trevor Penning and Nick Saldivari, and there's no telling what's going to happen with either. Penning, also another former first rounder who has nowhere near lived up to any expectations at all that was put on him. Nick Saldivari was a rookie last year, 4th-round pick from smaller school. I think it was Old Dominion. Was an offensive tackle in college. Hardly played any last year. He was kind of a guy they liked, especially in the gap scheme, which we're not running anymore. And the thought possibility that I've read is that he would be able to move to guard and make a pretty good guard, possibly taking over for James Hurst at left guard. Now we have the scheme change. So we have a former college tackle that was expected to move to guard in the gap scheme, and now we're running his own scheme. So I really don't know what you do with these three guys. But when you look at this depth chart, they're going to have to do something. Some kind of way they will be needed. You just don't know where you need them, where you're going to put them, or what you're going to do with them. That leaves everyone to believe it has to be offensive lineman. It has to be offensive lineman. I can't disagree with that, but I do have to point out this position over here, and I left it for last for a reason. This can be an important position in the gap scheme. In the zone scheme, especially in the wide zone. Especially in the wide zone where you're looking to work off of play action. A lot goes into this. It's not a necessity by any stretch. It's sort of one of those things that you have in life where I don't really need it, but man, life would be so much easier if I had one. Sitting at 14, there's really one tight end floating around in the rookie draft, first round, by the name of Brock Bowers. And we'll talk a little more about the rookies in a minute. But this situation, knowing at tight end, Moreau, Juwan Johnson, and Tommy Hudson, which I don't know anything about. Moreau last year came back from cancer in the offseason, was able to play most of the year, played decently, but he wasn't the contributor he was with the Raiders. He and Derek Carr used to play together at the Raiders. And Moreau was kind of a backup tight end, blocking tight end, but he could do some a little damage in the passing game as far as receiving. We didn't really see much of that last year. So he's a question mark. Juwan Johnson's basically a big pass catcher. He's not going to really help you a lot in the blocking. At least he hasn't shown it so far. And if Brock Bowers is there at 14, I understand the just total mess we have along the offensive line, especially at tackles. Just saying, it could be a possibility. But we'll get into that in just 1 minute. Uh, After reviewing the depth chart, or my best guess at what a Saints depth chart is looking like right now, I think it's easy to see that offensively, the offensive line definitely needs to be addressed in this draft. The other offensive spots, I don't think receiver is a need as much as a possible luxury. If the right guy's there at 14, maybe. Quarterback, Saints fans are just going to have to resign themselves to the fact that Carr is going to be around for a while, and they are not going to. I don't care who's available at 14. That's a quarterback. They're not drafting him. Running back. This is a draft class where I don't think there's a first round worthy running back in the group. So not really an option, and I'm sure something the Saints are not really looking at 14. So you kind of left offensive line and tight end. Put a pin in tight end. We're going to come back around to that. And there's really 5 really good offensive linemen in this draft that, depending on how picks 1 through 13 work out, some combination should be there. The top guy, almost universally on everybody's draft board, is Joe Alt from Notre Dame, a left tackle. I do not think I would be concerned if he's still there at 14 because I would be worried that some of the teams in front of us that also need offensive line help uncovered something making him fall. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to be the first lineman off the board, probably somewhere in the top 10. And you get to Taliese Fuaga, primarily a right tackle with Oregon State. Troy Fatanu, who was a left tackle at University of Washington. Olumuyiwa Fashanu, a left tackle for Penn State, and J.C. Latham, a right tackle for Alabama. And the reason why I'm giving you right or left, because predominantly these guys stayed on either the right or left side of the line of scrimmage throughout their college career, and some do have some snaps at guard over the years, but they're tackles, and they're Fuaga and Latham on the right side, Fashanu and Fatanu on the left side. I don't think any of these are necessarily a bad idea from the Saints. Fuaga and Fatanu have, because they all have some question marks, but one of the common traits they all have, they're big, they're athletic linemen who should fit a lot of what the Saints are trying to do in their scheme. Fuaga on the right as a right tackle is one that is mentioned. And I think the reason why he's ranked the highest of the 4 is everybody's pretty convinced he's going to be a starting NFL lineman very soon once he's drafted, possibly as a rookie year, probably is in his rookie year. Not a lot of development. He's more of a question mark of where he's going to play. There's a lot of belief he can play tackle. But if he can't, there's almost universal belief he can play guard. The Saints tackle situation, especially at right tackle with Ryan Ramczyk, is in serious doubt right now. I think they would lean towards the tackles. But in the case of Fuaga, if he could not really handle right tackle, but he could step in and lock down one of the guard spots and help Eric McCoy in the middle of the line, especially this year in 2024 with the problems the Saints offensive line on paper looks like they have now. I'm not against it, but I would prefer, and Fatanu kind of falls in the same category of a left tackle that a lot believe he can play one of the two tackle spots in the NFL, but a strong belief he's also going to wind up at guard. So I kind of feel the same way about both of them. Fashanu is a left tackle. Latham is a right tackle. They played in power conferences. Fashanu at Penn State in the Big Ten, national champion Michigan. We're all Saints fans, so we're all pretty familiar with what goes on at Alabama. Latham was a 2-year stud there at right tackle. Only really knocks either one of these guys get in their grading or their evaluation is Fashanu is kind of mentioned as needing to get stronger. A little bit of a flag, but he's only 21. In fact, I believe Latham is also, Latham is 21. They're both young guys. Latham is kind of the opposite, where he's racked up like 18 penalties over the last 2 years and I believe both years around 840 snaps at right tackle. So he plays games. He's out there every week. He's mean, nasty, big, and very athletic. I really think if offensive line help in the draft, I would prefer it coming from one of these two, even with their question marks. I think they're okay. I think they're battle tested. They're not, it's not like the Trevor Penning situation where it's small school being drafted in the first round, showing up and expected to do something in the NFL, and it hasn't worked out yet. By the same token, when you look at these two, with Fuaga and Fatanu, Cesar Ruiz was actually a center in Michigan. We drafted him in the first round because it was commonly believed if he can't, if he's not going to play center in the NFL, and we have Eric McCoy already there, he should be able to kick out and play guard and it not be a problem. Well, 3 years into that experiment, it's less of a problem than it was the first 2 years, but it's still a problem. I just feel like I want to avoid that when we're talking about drafting offensive linemen. I would rather get Fashanu in the weight room or calm Latham down a little bit and, hey, let's try to get the those 18, I think it was 18 penalties a year, something insane like that. Get that calm down a little bit and, try not to get the guys in a striped shirt to throw the yellow hanky so much when you're out there playing. So I'm of the opinion those are the two targets. If you want to stick to the offensive line, you're hoping you get one of those two, but I think you can live with the other two. But my dark horse, the guy I like, the guy he could be there possibly, but I would not say a high probability that Brock Bowers will be available at 14. But if he is, I feel like regardless of who's the offensive linemen who are there, you take Bowers. The reason why you take Bowers is this offense, we're assuming that Kubiak's going to come in and basically do what we've seen other coordinators and other coaches that kind of come out of that Shanahan tree do, which is it's going to be very similar to what Frisco does, but there's going to be some changes and it's not identical. They're not trying to recreate the wheel or reinvent the wheel, but they're using it as the basis for what they're building. And at its core, the skill positions, the top skill position guys that make plays for Frisco, they're versatile. The blocking scheme is versatile. The offense itself is versatile. The players, the primary players they're trying to use for production, Deebo Samuels, Christian McCaffrey, versatile, both in the run game and the passing game. Their top tight end, George Kittle's, versatile. Versatile as he could line up as a tight end right next to the tackle on the line of scrimmage, where traditional tight ends line up. He can line up wide out there with the receivers. He can make plays from both positions in the passing game. He is a fairly good blocker in both positions. When he's on the field, there is no tip to the defense whether this is run, pass, if it's pass or run, and that's kind of the scheme design. We want to hide and confuse, but we're still going to be running something very basic at the defense. Kittles has never been, I don't think, a true top option in that offense when you're talking about a Christian McCaffrey and a Debo Samuels and other receivers like Brandon Ayuk and some of the playmakers that they have around him, but he's vital. And I think Bowers can be that. I don't think I know Bowers can be that guy where, like Kittles, extremely athletic. Like Kittles, can line him up anywhere, traditional tight end, or if you want to be creative with doing something on the outside. Like Kittles, he can give you blocking from both spots. Like Kittles, he is athletic when he catches the ball. He's not the biggest tight end because he only weighs about 240 or 243, I think, maybe at the combine. But there's possibility he could get a little bigger. But he's still extremely powerful for even not being that maybe 250-ish where you see those inside tight ends a little bigger. I don't think it's really a problem for him. I think if he's there at 14, there are other ways to address the offensive line issues. Further in the draft at 45, I think there's going to be some possibilities, not quite as good as the four we just talked about, but are still going to be pretty good and could still come in and help. And I think there's always the veteran. I think it needs to be mentioned. There's the veteran route after the draft, somewhere around June 2nd, after the June 1st uh, cut date. The possibility of a veteran offensive lineman being brought in on a team friendly deal to fill in somewhere. There's veteran offensive lineman Mekhi Becton is out there. Andrews Pete is still out there. He had one visit that I know of with the Titans, left without a contract. I don't know if he has anything, and nothing's really going to happen until after the draft. Once the draft happens, then teams are going to reevaluate and start looking at these veterans. But there's a possibility Pete, somewhere around June, July, before training camp even, is brought back, team friendly deal. He played well last year. He might have one more year in him. I would like to avoid having to rely on yet another kind of aging veteran, but it's a possibility. So I think I would roll the dice, gamble on that, just to have Bowers here the next 5 years. And this isn't to say, as we talked about earlier, the solution may already be on that roster somewhere, on that in guesswork depth chart. That's the new coaching staff. That's Clint Kubiak. That's John Benton, the offensive line coach. They may have something up their sleeve. They may know something. It may be a shuffle. It may be something we're not expected. Frisco, the Rams, the two kind of, hell, even Cincinnati, who their head coach is comes from the Sean McVay tree of the zone scheme. They've all had their offensive line issues over the year, but they still figure out ways to win games and score points. Not unheard of. It's not the ideal situation, but it gives me enough hope that it doesn't necessarily have to be an offensive lineman at 14, especially if you have a player like Brock Bowers sitting there available. So we're gonna wrap it up here, just focusing on the offense. Next episode we'll talk about the defense a little bit. But like I said, I think this pick's gonna more than likely be focused more on the offensive side of the ball. The draft is coming up right about 2 weeks, April 25th. Yes, 25th. I had to double check the date. April 25th on a Thursday is when it starts. Wraps up on Saturday, the 27th. And on April 28th, which is that Sunday night, instead of recording this podcast, we're going to be live streaming that Sunday night, on as the post draft wrap up. I'm also looking into streaming at some point during the draft itself, the 3 day event. So, kind of working out the schedule on that. But as soon as I get all the details ironed out, hopefully in the next couple of days, by the time the next episode on the defense drops, I'll have dates and times more firmed up for you. So, till then, please post some comments down below, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification button so you know, especially now that more of this is going to be more of a live stream. Not always, some will still be recorded, but the notification that'll let you know, hey, I'm about to go live, especially that weekend once I get the schedule worked out. And my Rumble people, don't forget, hit the follow. So, looking forward to this is kind of really one of the fun parts of being a football fan. This kind of slow, steady, increasing build up towards the draft. A little inside of 2 weeks away, and I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be fun. Till next time, I'm Tim. Peace out. Who dat?